Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow, EU, and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and/or go to the Facebook Live video feed, the link to which I will now place in the chat room. There it has been placed. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. Tonight, our featured guest is Natsuki Fukasawa, Professor of Practice in Piano at the University of the Pacific Conservatory of Music. Professor Fukasawa is joined by Dr. Alan Lin, DO, an emergency medicine physician, by Miguel de Aguila, a three-time Grammy-nominated American composer, and by Richard Chonko, Professor of Piano at California State University, Sacramento. Also joining us tonight is Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California and Professor Niels Moos, Director of the Opera Masters Program at the Music and Arts University of the city of Vienna. Natsuki, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Simeon.
With pleasure. So tell us a little bit about, where you grew up, how you got into music.
Well, I had good guidance. I was fortunate to have good guidance from very early on because my mother is a piano teacher. She still is a piano teacher. And she made sure that I had the best teachers from very early on when I was growing up in Japan. First, my mother started me with the rudiments of music, and at age 8, I was studying with Mrs. Ishikawa in Tokyo. I commuted about 1.5 hours on the train every week as an 8-year-old to take a piano lesson every week.
So very serious already. You're very young. It was very, very serious thing, piano in your family.
I think I was expected to be serious. I still remember having this conversation before we were starting with Mrs. Ishikawa, that I was sat down at the table and said, this is very serious because there's a lot of commitment. There's not going to be a Saturday for us in our family because of you taking piano lesson all the way in Tokyo. So you have to be ready. And so my dad, and my little sister, they were at home with my mother and me being in Tokyo every Saturday. I still remember that. So it was expected that I should take it seriously.
And was it fun, or was it a struggle, or how was it exactly?
I think it was a lot of both. I loved Mrs. Ishikawa and I loved her studio. She took us every year to the Japan Alps for the retreat, and we sang and we hiked, and because she studied in Salzburg as a student herself, so she really cherished that mountain air and hiking, and she wanted to incorporate that into the part of the musical experience. So I had a lot of fun there, but also it was I didn't particularly like practicing, so it was difficult to focus and practice, and I got in a lot of trouble for not really doing good practice.
In trouble from your family, who said, we're making this big sacrifice for you and you're not practicing, or from your teacher?
Both, but a lot from my mother. Yeah, she got
Understood.
often very angry with me because, she taught piano lessons. So every time I was supposed to practice, it was when everybody else my age was watching their favorite TV show, and I couldn't watch any of the TV show, and I had to practice. I didn't like that.
So I understand that you have a Schubert Liszt piece, an arrangement of a Schubert Lied, Du bist die Ruhe, arranged by Liszt, that you'd be willing to play for us and have us hear what all of this back and forth from Tokyo contributed to your piano playing.
Sure, yes. So just as a footnote, Du bist die Ruhe means you are my peace. And I just started playing this during this shutdown pandemic situation. I guess just to make myself feel better, to find peace.
Wonderful, lovely, brava.
That's not
Really,
all of it, but for the time
uh,
being.
that's enough. And what a lovely, lovely atmosphere. Like you said, how you play this with the idea of peace during this challenging time in the corona pandemic. So thank you very much. So tell us about your next step. You went to Juilliard. You went from Tokyo to New York City. Tell us about that and this idea of classical music being something that you play correctly. There's a correct way of doing it. This is how it goes.
Well, I don't know if that was the intention of, my education, but being classical musician means that you have to really understand the style, the history, the performance practice aspect of the music looms large for us. It's very important that we don't play Beethoven like we're playing Chopin, or we don't play Bach like it's a romantic piece of music, even though I believed that every piece of music is romantic at the core. And when I finished Juilliard, I really felt like there was something more that I needed to search, because I felt like so much of the emphasis was about playing it correctly, playing it. This is how it goes. This is how the piece goes. We learn a lot of standard repertoire from the standard repertoire list, which is such a funny word. It's just all the pieces that we study are part of standard repertoire, and there's so much of this idea, this is how this piece should be played, instead of having this sense of discovering for yourself what this piece means to you.
Tell us about Natsuki a little bit. As we know, people say many things about the Juilliard School. One of them, of course, is that it's fiercely competitive. How has competition played a role in your life in Tokyo, in Juilliard?
I think in hindsight, it made me a tougher person, but I don't think I was necessarily the happiest person. I was immature. I don't think I was really ready for that kind of atmosphere. I was just suddenly, from very protected, very traditional Japanese home to somewhere in New York all by myself. My English wasn't really all that great. And so it was lonely and it was difficult. There was a lot of challenge.
Thank you for sharing that.
I learned a lot from that experience. It made me a better person in the long run, but I wouldn't say it was the happiest years of my life.
So thank you very much for sharing such intimate details with us. I'd like to ask, what was it? Why did they send you there? What was the purpose? What was supposed to come of it?
I chose it myself. I wanted to go. I wanted to go because my understanding was that was the best school, and I wanted to take the best. I wanted to take on the best, and I think that's my personality. Maybe being the oldest, sibling, and I think my inherent character is I'm a pleaser, and I want to do my best. So I just went head on. Didn't really think about whether I was ready for that or fit for that. And I think my teacher in LA, right before I went to Juilliard, I was already living in LA. He was not really enthused about me studying there, even though he studied there himself.
Understood.
But he said, I know nothing can stop you. And he was right.
So Natsuki, then you went to Prague. You went
Yes.
somewhere completely different, much different than New York City, different than LA. Tell us about there in Prague at the Academy of Music.
So I met Mr. Jan Panenka at the Prague Academy a few years before in a music festival in Japan. And I really respected him deeply, and I wanted to study with him. And I had the honor of receiving the Fulbright scholarship to study in Prague. And that's where things really started to open up to a different world for me. I can say that in hindsight because that was many years ago. But I started meeting new people, all kinds of different kinds of people that took me to different places, namely meeting my piano trio colleague Yen and Lena, who are sisters from Denmark, and we studied with different teachers.
So what was the key difference, or would you make us maybe illustrate a little bit the difference between New York, your life in New York and your life in Prague?
Well, life in Prague, it was a lot of fun. Prague is a beautiful city, and it was just after the Iron Curtain has lifted and people are starting to be free. It was a really fascinating time. I mean, there was like one McDonald's right there. When I moved there, there was only one McDonald's, and it was the biggest fascination for the locals, who has been shut off from the Western culture for a long time. And we could go see a concert or opera every night with a student ID card. It was all free, which is unheard of in United States. And a movie was $1. So there was so much culture, and so many friends, and we were always hanging out together because we were the foreigners, and we really spent a lot of time together.
Fantastic. So I'd like to take a look now at this video of your professor, Tim Fredrickson, professor at the Royal Danish Academy of Music. So let's take a look. This is a video made by, it's called Go With The Flow, Masterclass with Tim Fredrickson by Girgit Tangberg. Let's take a look at this video.
Vi skal være enormt alert. Det er tungt, når vi starter med diminuendet ud, så kommer det op i tempo. Man kan godt være lidt kraftigere og lidt tættere ved stolen. Ja, det er rigtigt det der. Dim, digga, digga, dim, bam, dim, dim, digga, digga, dim, bam, dim, digga, dim. Umiddelbart tror man jo bare, at det er en vals, men altså, der ligger så mange lag, der er så meget sarkasme, og der er så meget skjul, og han citerer sig selv fra sin cellokoncert, er der citater, og man kan mærke den fortvivlelse, der er i det. Og den der altså næsten vrængende sarkasme, der kan være i. You have to make this look also like machines. Can I start with this one machine? It's like a locomotive.
So tell us about Tim Fredrickson. How did you meet him? Was he in Prague? And what was, we can tell there's some kind of difference between that and your studies at Juilliard. Tell us about him.
Well, we studied with Tim in Denmark, Mr. Fredrickson in Denmark. We called him Tim. I guess in Denmark things are a little bit more casual. And he really, I mean, I really wouldn't be who I am without his guidance. He just knew how to make music come to life for us. I mean, as you could see in the video, it wasn't just, this is how you should play it. Look what it's doing, and this is what it means. And so much of what we do as pianists, actually, and also as a chamber music, the music does not have words. It's abstract. And you know, what do you do when the piece just says sonata, or it's a trio, or it's an intermezzo? You know, okay, nocturne. We know it's a night piece, but beyond that, we don't understand the text or the story behind the music. And he made me realize what is there in that sense.
And so you went from
listen for it.
So you went from Prague to Denmark, or this was a different occasion. But tell us, so what was it like in Denmark then?
I was living in Denmark on and off for 10 years to be part of the piano trio called the Alina Trio. And we studied with Mr. Tim Fredrickson. And yeah, it was just a wonderful experience because through him, the music came to life.
So you were, so if I understand correctly, these were the two other musicians you met in Prague, and
right.
Then they returned to Denmark, and then your piano trio kept happening.
Yes, we
Fantastic.
formed the piano trio in Prague towards the end of our year together, and we decided that we wanted to stay together because we played very well together right away, and so.
Fantastic. And they're professional musicians today? You're still in contact with them? You're still performing?
Yes. We're not playing together anymore. It became a little bit more difficult when I moved to California, and they also have families, and the rehearsal became rather difficult when the violinist Alina had 2 children and with no babysitter. It was quite difficult, and we thought, well, 10 years is a good year together. So
understood. So we have another teacher of yours who was very influential, Ferenc Rados, who is teaching here. This is a video courtesy of the Reina Sofia School of Music in Madrid. Let's take a look at this.
May I stop you? I guess that perhaps that you lay down your hand and then you have. I don't really believe this. No, could you play this here where you were? This is so очень yeah. So at yes, this is sometimes here, sometimes there, and what you play.
Fantastic. So it seems like he likes to sing at the same time as playing and sing his own melody. So tell us about Ferenc Rados.
So Mr. Rados is a very different kind of teacher that you can see from the little bit of the clip. He was much more like a philosopher, or very difficult to understand him when I started to study with him, because when you ask a question, you got more questions back instead of he giving you an answer. I remember still one time when I asked him, we asked him, who is your favorite recording of this particular piece that we're studying? And he would say, after a long pause, he would say, well, if I want to listen to music, I just look in the music myself, instead of playing. He would look at the score, and he really taught me how to look at the score. I mean, how to take things out of the score, what those dots mean. I mean, beyond the rhythm and the pitch, what does that mean? What is it doing? What are the notes doing? Is what he taught me. And I still remember after this intensive study that we had in Budapest, we moved to Budapest to study with him, and we had lessons probably 3 times a week, and it lasted about 3 hours straight, no break. And this went on for about 4 months, and when I came home, I absolutely could not play a note for a month. It was the weirdest experience I had, because I just couldn't play. And I was talking with my friend, colleague, Jan and Lena. It's like, I can't play anything right now. I don't even want to play. I don't know what to play. I physically, I couldn't play. I couldn't make myself go to the piano and make a sound. And it took about a month. And then when I came out of it, it was like I don't know, it was something totally different for me.
Wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your work today at University of the Pacific Conservatory of Music, and tell us also because you're a professor, but you're also studying music therapy, or you're attending courses at the same time, just like a real member of a college would do. Tell us about your work there and about this music therapy and how you got into that.
So I started teaching at the Pacific about 2 years ago, University of the Pacific, and I teach applied piano to piano majors, and we have performance majors, we have music therapy majors, and composition majors. Many different majors, but who choose piano as their main instrument. And one of the program that they offer at the Pacific that is quite unique is the music therapy, which I didn't know very much about until when I joined the faculty. And they actually treat patients with music to heal them. And that really, because I knew intuitively that music is healing, but I didn't really pay much attention to the medical aspect of music being effective. And I started to be more and more interested. And
So
I'm not.
How did you? Sorry, excuse me. Go
I'm
on.
not really studying it formally. I'm not taking courses. I'm just poking my head and attending lectures whenever possible. So it's very much on my own. But my idea is to, keep studying some way. I hope the avenue keeps opening up so I have more access to learn this very important field.
So Natsuki, you had actually, if I understand, you had a hand injury.
Right.
And you had to go through some kind of treatment, and you were grieving. Tell us about that.
So this happened about 2 years ago, exactly right around this time. I could not play a single note with my left hand. My hand was injured. I couldn't even lift a piece of paper with my left hand. It was so painful. And I sought help from many different doctors, including hand doctors, hand surgeons, and nothing was really helping. And I knew that it was diagnosed as Dicervan tenosynovitis, which is basically tendonitis of the thumb, and usually takes a long time to heal, and which was so depressing for me. This was probably one of the darkest period of my life, because I didn't know if I could stay in music with this injury. But through my a friend, violinist William Barbini and Kineko Barbini, I was introduced to Dr. Lin, who is here today with us, and he gave me a therapy that is just most unconventional, because I spoke with so many colleagues and friends who had the same issue, who had hand surgeries. I was recommended to get a surgery or put steroids in my hand, and I didn't want to go that route somehow. And then I met Dr. Lin, and I didn't have to go through any of that. And I was healed I met him, and he gave me 8 treatments or so of about 1 hour, and I was healed. I could play. And I was
Miraculous.
playing in June. It was incredible. It took less than half a year, which is, I never met anybody else who was healed that quickly. And I wanted to share this way he healed me with more people.
Dr. Lin, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, thank you for healing Natsuki, and thank you for being willing to talk a little bit about the treatment that you gave her.
Sure, it's been my pleasure to join you.
So tell us, how was it when Natsuki arrived?
So we have a mutual friend with another musician, Mr. William Barbini. And then one day when I took my daughter for her violin lesson, he mentioned to me about what happened with Natsuki, about her thumb and hand. And then when I first heard about it, I recognized the symptoms because I had similar symptoms about 7, 8 years ago. And I recognize it as, the symptom of a pinched nerve, which, will present very similarly, like a tendinitis. And then I have I mentioned that this is something perhaps I could help, because of my background and my personal experience. I, offer, multiple modality on how we can address and attack this problem. And then, we went over each treatment option one by one, and then try to find out what would be the most acceptable treatment option. And then, and I offered, since she has the visit other physician already, and then, most of the treatment didn't seem to help much. And I mentioned that there's a type of a treatment called the shockwave therapy, or we call piezo wave therapy. It's actually very popular in Europe. And then the technology was invented by a German scientist, and has been around for more than 20 years now. But it is very new here in the United States. I personally had the experience with the treatment. I have a pinched nerve with a bulging disc, and at one time, I went through all the different type of treatment, including, talking to spine surgeon about surgery, talk to, the traditional, Asian treatment like acupunctures, massages, and all that. And then I finally had a chance to, discover this new technology. I was very unconvinced from the beginning. However, after 1 to 2 treatment, I, experienced a significant improvement on my symptoms. And ever since then, I've become a believer of this treatment. And it just so happened that, the Natsuki came to me and they said, hey, she has similar symptoms. And then I said, well, perhaps we can try this. And I'm very glad that you actually help.
So in other words, you used sound waves, the same as music, to put them injecting sound waves into that area, and that it healed that way? Is that what it is?
Yes. So basically, piezo wave is a type of acoustic or a sound wave. It converts electrical charges and into a sound wave at a certain frequency. And then only certain part of our body tissue can pick up that sound wave at that frequency. And then once that injured, body area pick up the wave, it will convert into some type of reaction, and then help to, with the healing process by dissolving all the scar tissue, by releasing the nerve, from the pinching area, and also promote, the body to heal.
Extraordinary. And tell us, doctor, how was it when you met Natsuki on a human level? She told me she was grieving. How do you deal with patients when they come to you with something as serious as their entire life's work? Her family sacrificed so that she could go to Tokyo, then to Juilliard. I mean, her whole family was invested in this, and then suddenly, because of this injury, she might have lost that.
Right. I think the most important thing is really to listen to your patient. And then, when she mentioned to me about, how she has suffered, her pain, and then I started to, think back on my own personal experience. The fact that, my personal belief that you have to treat, our body in a more holistic approach. Just because someone had pain, in one certain area, does not mean that the problem originates from that area. You have to think about, the whole body, the human anatomy. You have to think about the whole physiology, the mechanism of injury, and so forth. And then because of her, she's a musician, and she's been playing piano for so many years. It's very likely that she suffered from, the repetitive, motion from the, daily practices. So, I start to think about, the human anatomy, that, even though she's only on her, feeling discomfort on her thumb and hand, however, that could originate from, the body higher up, such as from the elbow, from the arm, from the shoulder, even from the neck itself. So we start to investigate one by one and then start to rule out, each possibility until we can finally, identify exactly what her problem was.
Understood. So Natsuki, if I may ask, when you play something like Du bist die Ruhe, or you're playing piano by yourself, do you think about Dr. Lin and the miracle? I guess you could say he was just doing his job and that he did his job for you.
I think of him often, actually. I am ever so grateful for all he has done for me, actually for pro bono. And it was just unbelievable that I was able to, meet with him, and I had the fortune, because I don't know what I would have done without him. I probably still being carrying the pain today, because people do for a long time once you have this, and I don't have that.
So thank you very much to Dr. Lin. Thank you very much for telling us about that. And thank you for taking care of Natsuki so well, so that she can play such beautiful music for us tonight. So
Yeah.
I would like to now talk about some more live music. This is a piece that is based on a poem by Antonio Machado. The poem is called Invisibles, and I'll read the poem now. The plaza has a tower. The tower has a balcony. The balcony has a lady. The lady, a white flower. There passed a man, nobody knows why. And he took away the plaza with its tower and its balcony, its lady and her white flower. So Natsuki, could you play this for us?
Yes. I will play the first movement, which goes with the first part of the poem, and a little bit of the second.
Lovely, wonderful, brava. So tell us about this music. Tell us about all of it and how you became how you got to know this music, where it comes from.
So this music was written for the Talus Festival in Academy, which took place for the first time in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. And when I was invited as a faculty, artistic faculty member, immediately took me back to the time that I knew a boy from Sarajevo that I was friend was in my Prague years when I was studying there. I met this boy named Damir, and he was the nicest soul. And unfortunately, I'm not in touch with him anymore. This was before we had emails or anything like that. And when I remember our conversation when we went to see a movie, and how I told him that I don't like seeing a violent movie. I have a very low tolerance to any violence. And Damir said to me, you have no idea what real violence is, and told me this most horrific story, which I would rather not share here, of his own experience. And so I thought that I had to honor the pain that people endured in this town when I go there. And I asked one of my favorite composers, Miguel de l'Aguila, along with my colleague, 5 other colleagues, pianists, we co-commissioned this piece.
Wonderful. And I see Miguel del Aguila is here with us tonight. Welcome. And tell us a little bit about how you came to write this music based on this poem.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here, Simon. Well, when Natsuki told me, first of all, I was also going to be in this festival in Sarajevo. So when she told me about this piece, and we already had an idea it was going to be about make a statement against violence. And so I always need some kind of idea to start a piece. In this case, it was a poem by Antonio Machado, which is very, it's very vague, its meaning. You can interpret it any way you want. It's a pretty well-known poem in Spanish language. And it's really, you know, the plaza is these people's world. That's what we heard at the beginning, right? The happiness, the playfulness of this physical space, which is a plaza, a square, right? And then as the piece goes on, you hear these trills on the piano, and then you start seeing the tower at a distance, and then it becomes more introverted with the last theme she played, and what you see is this lady who is in this balcony, and you start actually the music focus on what she's feeling, on her personality, and that is the theme that dominates the entire piece. And so this person passes by, and instead of taking one thing at a time, he takes the entire plaza, meaning somebody's world, an entire world away, right? And so in a way, logically, everything is backwards, right? Because he takes first everything, and then the poet enumerates the things that go away along with the plaza, right? And so that sort of lack of logic is what makes this poem to me so interesting musically. So the piece after the part you heard continues, and it gets more and more dramatic. I think Natsuki Cantelli is probably one of my most difficult pieces to play, and she's been so patient when I was writing, going through my many versions of it, and you do an excellent job with it, Natsuki. Every time I hear you, it sounds better. So the um, the piece is really, and I think it couldn't be a better time to play this piece now with the pandemic, because it is about loss. It's about everything that's lost with when there is violence, when there is destruction. It's also about how fragile everything is. In this case, this lady's world, it just gets taken away in a second. And I always think it's so difficult to do good, to not to do good, but to build, to make things better. And yet it's so easy to destroy things. It's so easy to do, you know, to do harm, to destroy things. And that's probably in many ways the premise of this piece. It gets very dramatic. And I think the history of Sarajevo also had something to do. When I was finally there, we were at the festival, you know, having lived in Uruguay during a military dictatorship, my life was really changed by violence and, you know, military governments. And so when I was in Sarajevo, I was, you know, I felt this past, this violent past, and in a way, all that is written in this piece, anticipating that visit. I lived in Vienna for 10 years during the 80s when uh, the ex-Yugoslavia was going through all these violent times. And of course, I had friends from there, and I lived so close, all these problems. So it's a piece that in a way could tell a story of so many things. It's very, I would say, evocative, of visually also very evocative.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Del Aguila. We have a question from Professor Lino Rivera. Lino?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, this interview is getting to be so multifaceted and very, very fascinating for me. Thank you. I have a question for Natsuki. Natsuki, when you um, you have played world premieres and especially new pieces by Miguel del Aguila, how do you approach learning a piece of music that is standard repertoire like a Beethoven sonata or a Chopin nocturne, compared to something that is very, very new, fresh from the print shop, shall we say? How do you approach learning and having ideas about music of those two categories?
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. I think the learning process is the same. You look at the score and try to take from it what it's saying to you, what it means to you. But it's liberating in one way, that there is no tradition of how this piece is performed. I'm the person who learned this piece that you just heard, so there's no reference recording that I could go to. But I also can consult the composer, which I cannot do with the composers of the past. And I remember playing for Miguel multiple times at the festival, and he's a tough critic. I can tell you. So I'm glad that he's finally happy with how I'm playing it.
Fantastic. So our next piece is based on the poem by Pushkin, Do Not Sing My Beauty. Do not sing my beauty to me, your sad songs of Georgia. They remind me of that other life and distant shore. Alas, they remind me, your cruel melodies, of the steppe, the night, and moonlit features of a poor, distant maiden. That sweet and fateful apparition I forget when you appear. But you sing, and before me I picture that image anew. Do not sing my beauty to me, your sad songs of Georgia. They remind me of that other life and distant shore. Natsuki?
also not in its
Lovely.
completeness.
Wonderful. Tell us about this work.
So I first came to this piece at another music festival where I'm a faculty member, Orfeo Music Festival. And I heard this piece during the masterclass by Dmitry Vudovin, who is the Bolshoi Opera artistic director, and he was giving a masterclass at the Orfeo Music Festival. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he conveyed the meaning of the text in a way that was just so beautiful that the tears started to come out of my eyes. I couldn't control it. Usually one person does not cry during master class. You know, you can cry during a concert, but not during a master class. And when I came home, I kept telling my husband, Richard, like, I need to make a transcript of this, and transcription of this. And then I kept talking about it, but no action. And then he made it for me.
So, is he here tonight?
I hope so.
I'm so happy to hear you play this. Of course, every time you play it, I just get chills. And it just couldn't be more appropriate, thinking of Pushkin's text, remembering a former life that we used to have during this COVID-19 nightmare. And it's very relevant today. And I've never heard it more beautiful than the way Natsuki plays it.
So what was it? You weren't there at the master class, but you heard about the master class. She told you about this episode. How was it from your perspective?
Yes, and of course, Vudovin is such a great teacher, and I usually do go to his master classes, and I probably missed just that one, you know. And I remember her talking a great deal about this piece, and so I started looking at it, and of course, I immediately hear the beauty in it. It's a gorgeous piece of music on the level of the vocalise of Rachmaninoff even. And I first made an arrangement for bassoon and piano, which was played by Natsuki and Scott Poole. And that piece has been subsequently published. And I thought, well, okay, now it's time to do the piano solo version of it. And, you know, sometimes when you make arrangements of things, it's because you can't find a suitable arrangement that already exists, as you want to do one that is better, so to speak. And so this is what came out.
That's just lovely. And Natsuki, so how was it? Did you work with Richard in order to get it the way that he wanted, or did you tell him, no, I want this, you do it that way?
Well, fortunately, we have found a way to coexist in the same household as two very independent-minded, rather stubborn-minded artists. We give each other a lot of space so we can both be who we are. And so he doesn't really interfere unless I ask. And I'm
That's probably very, very good advice for any husband. Okay.
I agree.
So wonderful. So let's take a look. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We have a lot more that we'd like to cover. So that just means that Natsuki, you'll have to come back again, come on the show. For now, let's take a look at how to stay in touch with Natsuki Fukasawa. There we have her website, natsukifukasawa.com. And we have information about her piano studio, about her upcoming events, recordings, all that. And we have her contact also, I see there. So you can, it's okay, people can just contact you, Natsuki?
Yes.
Wonderful. So we just go to the contact there at the top of the page. There's the contact at the top of the page on the right. It says contact. There it is. And then just send a message to Natsuki at natsukifukasawa.com. That's easy enough. Wonderful. Fantastic. So thank you so very much to Professor Natsuki Fukasawa. Thank you very much to Dr. Alan Lin, to Miguel del Aguila, and to Professor Richard Chonko. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So let's take a look at next Wednesday. We have Carol Bagot Forte. All voices are uniquely beautiful. Most doctors will surely agree. If you've seen one body, you've seen one body. Even as children, it is impressed upon us that each and every human being is inherently unique and special. So, even with the firm understanding that we are a heterogeneous bunch, why is it that we so often try to, quote, fit in with those around us? For singers, that question is as personal as it is professional. Singing like others do may damage one's voice and lead to the early end of a singing career. Carol Bagot Forte knows that well. She has been researching it for over 40 years. Carol, quote unquote, liberates voices by coaching singers all over the world to sing in a way that only she or he can. 3 of her outstanding pupils, Charlotte Nafziger, George Kriza, and Brooke Fletcher, will join us to share with us just what uniquely beautiful sounds like. As always, all information is available at www.simeonmoro.com. So that's next week, Wednesday, March 10th. Carol Bagot Forte, all voices are uniquely beautiful. So thank you very much again to Professor Natsuki Fukasawa. Thank you very much to Dr. Alan Lin, to Miguel del Aguila, Professor Richard Chonko, to Professor Lino Rivera and Professor Niels Moos. Thank you very much to our superhero production team led by Juan Orea. And most of all, thanks to you, our participants, for making this all worthwhile. So from Vienna, Austria, from the Bay Area, California, from Seattle, Washington, goodbye and see you next Wednesday.
Bye.